We begin with the latest from the Middle East, where a United Nations team has found clear and convincing information that hostages held by Hamas in Gaza were sexually abused. A report submitted by United Nations Special Envoy on Sexual Violence in Conflict says that some women and children hostages had been subject to rape and sexualized torture. The report states that the team has reasonable grounds to believe such abuses were in fact taking place.
With regard to the hostages taken to Gaza, we found clear and convincing information that sexual violence, including rape, sexualized torture, cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment, has been committed against captives. And we also have reasonable grounds to believe that such violence may still be ongoing against those still held in captivity. I pause and must add that I am of the strong opinion that this finding does not in any way legitimize further violence, but actually reinforces the need for an urgent ceasefire.
Now, UN Special Envoy Pramila Patten also reported that the team had reasonable grounds to believe sexual assaults, including rape and gang rape, took place during the October 7 attacks by Hamas.
We also found that there are reasonable grounds to believe that conflict-related sexual violence, including rape and gang rape, occurred during the 7th of October attacks in at least 3 locations, namely the Nova Music Festival site and its surroundings, Road 232, and Kibbutz Reim. And in most of these incidents, victims were first subjected to rape and then killed, and at least 2 incidents relate to the rape of women's corpses.
The Special Envoy Patten led a 9-member team of experts to Israel and the West Bank last month, but the team cautioned there were limitations on what it could actually achieve. Chief among those limitations was a lack of access to survivors of these actual attacks. In fact, Patten said the team did not manage to meet any survivors of sexual violence during the October 7th attacks. However, they were able to talk to multiple witnesses, released hostages, and were able to review video footage and pictures. The report was finalized based on first-hand accounts of released hostages. Now, the report emerges amid soaring tensions over the handling of allegations of sexual assault by Hamas. And now Israel has accused the United Nations of taking too long to respond to these claims. And in a further stinging rebuke, Israel has recalled its ambassador from the United Nations. The UN, however, has defended itself against Israel's allegations.
This year, the UN and UN Women's silence in the face of Hamas sexual violence turned International Women's Day into a sick joke. This is the peak of the UN's hypocrisy. The UN claims to care about women. Yet, as we speak, right now, Israeli women are being raped and abused by Hamas terrorists. Where is the UN's voice? Where is your voice? Colleagues, I call on the Secretary General and the Security Council to convene immediately to finally condemn Hamas's heinous crimes. Hamas must face unrelenting pressure to end their sexual violence and release all of the hostages immediately.
Now, at the heart of this bitter dispute between Israel and the United Nations is also the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees. Several Western countries, including the United States, have pulled funding to the UNRWA after Israel accused nearly a dozen of its employees of involvement in the October 7 attack. The Israeli Defense Ministry further alleges that the UN aid agency in Gaza employed more than 450 military operatives from Hamas and other armed groups.
Over 450 UNRWA employees are military operatives in terror groups in Gaza. Over 450. This is no mere coincidence. This is systematic. There is no claiming we did not know. Hamas exploits humanitarian organizations. and uses them to commit crimes against humanity. These terrorists are employed by UNRWA. They receive salaries that are paid by the international community. Donations that are meant for humanitarian purposes, meant to benefit the people of Gaza, are funding mass murderers and rapists.
UNRWA has been proven to be an instrumental part of Hamas's terror machine. Yet rather than take responsibility for the weaponization of this UN agency, senior UN officials have chosen to say that they had no knowledge of Hamas's hold on the agency.
Now, the head of the UN Palestinian Refugee Agency has warned of a deliberate and concerted campaign aimed at ending its operations in Gaza. The agency head has also called out Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for openly stating that the UNRWA will not be a part of a post-war Gaza.
The fate of the agency and the millions of people who depend on it hang in the balance. Excellencies, UNRWA is facing a deliberate and concerted campaign to undermine its operations and ultimately end them. More blatant is the Israeli Prime Minister openly stating that UNRWA will not be part of post-war Gaza. The implementation of this plan is already underway with the destruction of our infrastructure across Gaza Strip.
The Assembly cannot look away as Israel continues targeting UNRWA with attacks on its staff and premises, obstruction of its humanitarian aid, attempts to evict it from occupied East Jerusalem, and a defamation campaign that has thrown its financial situation into turmoil after a sudden suspension of funding by several major donors. That this is happening in the midst of the ongoing catastrophe in Gaza makes it even more harrowing.
Now, on Monday, the UN Palestinian Refugee Agency said members of its own staff had been detained, tortured, and sexually abused by Israel. It also claims that some of its staff had been forced to sign confessions related to the October 7th attack. The Israeli military called these claims unsubstantiated. It said that this was a cynical attempt to create false equivalency with the systematic use of rape as a weapon of war by Hamas. The UNRWA employs around 30,000 people in the occupied Palestinian territories, Lebanon, Jordan, and Syria, with about 13,000 staff in the Gaza Strip. It's also been at the center of providing humanitarian relief in Gaza, where aid groups are warning of a looming famine after 5 months of war.
From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
We're beating Biden.
How dare he say that?
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on Firstpost America.